Hey. All right. That's always so awkward when it starts recording. Um, it's just that delightful voice. You are now under surveillance. Now.
Yeah, right.
All right. I guess it's just the three of us today. So let's just jump into it. Today I wanted to talk about imagery and voice specifically, and how to incorporate those into our poems to kind of elevate them a little bit. But before we got started, I would like to, hear if you guys wrote anything. So if anybody has written anything that they want to share, I am going to invite you to do so now. And if you guys want written feedback, you can email me, and the email's right there in the slide. So go ahead and make note of that email, and I'll give you guys written feedback if you would like. Okay.
I wrote something really fast this morning when I was journaling
Okay.
about other things, and I have some other little things I've been doing on Facebook for our library of 30 poems in 30 days. So I'm basically just giving people a form, like Cane or something, and
Sure.
nobody has shared any poetry with me, but I've been challenging myself to post a poem with each post every day. So that's been
Yeah.
kind of
Very good.
interesting. And I definitely could use some work on them and
Hmm.
could go a little deeper, but they're I always think sometimes like with my drawing, my doodling and drawing, I still am my poetry too is still stuck at like 10 years old because for a
Oh.
long time for a long time I didn't do creative stuff because I had a lot of like, as Brene Brown would say, art scars. So
Oh.
sometimes I feel like I have the ability to go deeper, but I don't. So, but um, this is what I wrote this morning, real quick.
Okay.
As I look out my front picture window, in a moment, I forget that we are in the grip of a global pandemic. Lack of money and introversion have always kept me close to home, enjoying my own company or my children, my husband, and our pet hedgehog. But then I sit at my computer or I make my once a month Target run, and the news, Facebook, and my fellow shoppers wearing masks and doing the coronavirus social distancing dance pops my solitude bubble. And I wonder if when this is all over, I ought to brave the world outside of it more often.
Okay. Very nice. So some key questions going on there, you know. When this is done, you know, I don't you forget you're in the middle of the pandemic until you go out there and people have the masks on. It's a little jarring. I got the email today. We've been doing the grocery pickup from Walmart lately, and so what we do is it's curbside. You just pull up, they throw it in your trunk. There's no contact. But before it was like you could have your window rolled down, but now they emailed new rules. You can't have your email. Yeah, you can't have your windows down. So even like the rules are continually changing. Um, and it's a little reminder of, oh, some serious stuff is going on right now. Um, so yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that's great. Cole, did you have anything that you wanted to share?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay.
good, good.
I'm on a boat, but I can't swim, and the boat is always in the water, and the water is the floor, and the floor is lava, and there's a hammock in the guest room, and I'm drinking Pacifico with a lime and listening to the Talking Heads. And that's my whole poem.
That's good. There's some good stuff in that. There's some really good things in there. I think there's room to build, and I think,
Oh, yeah. I think there's
yeah,
room to build. Yeah.
there's
I
definitely
was
room to build. But
So like I was thinking about new point of view, and so on Monday after the first poetry workshop, I set up a hammock in the guest room, and I have a small apartment, so I don't have like a whole lot of space for that because it's like one of those freestanding hammocks with the legs on it, and
Mhm.
there's not a whole lot of room for it. And my husband, I don't think is super happy about it being in there, but it's kind of just nice to have like a little bit more like a different change, like a little change of how the space is in this space, and like a little bit of um it adds a little bit more to my vacation feeling when I'm here in this
Yeah.
apartment.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, that's really great. I like how it's really just like rapid fire too. It's like here's the thought and here's the thought and here's the thought, and you go from like the floor is lava to the hammock to the talking heads. I kind of like that kind of like machine gun kind of firing of these images at you, and uh it kind of, I think, reminds me of like I did a little at home workout using the Nike app on like yesterday, and there was this moment after that it was just like, it was just very jarring to me that, like, whether it's anxiety or whatnot, my heart rate wasn't coming down fast enough, and I started to kind of like have a little bit of panic in me, not necessarily because there was anything wrong necessarily, but my heart rate was still going, and so my body still wanted to go. And it was just one of those moments where images were presenting in that same way. And so I think that's really great. It's mimicking kind of the way the human psyche is kind of jumping from one thing to another right now.
I think that's how
So,
my human psyche always works. And so I think being home, I feel a little less rapid fire,
mm,
especially Caroline works at the Ellsworth Library. So we both sort of have this thing where you have the balance between library work, which is sort of like, focused, deep work, and then
mhm.
customer service, where like you are doing deep work and then you are talking to, you have a patron approach, and then you sort of are shifting focus all the time. Um,
Yeah,
is multitasking a myth potentially? So it's really interesting. It's
yeah,
interesting place right now where you are where I don't really have to multitask.
yeah,
Um, so yeah,
yeah.
I don't know.
That's great. I kind of find that I'm more in that rapid fire when I'm at home because of the kids. The kids
Oh,
are
sure.
always pulling me every direction. So, but yeah, I don't know. I really like that. There's a lot of really nice stuff in both of those pieces. Um, So I guess we can just kind of jump into what I wanted to talk about today, which would be image and voice, and we're going to talk about some things like that you can kind of work with, and then, maybe we can start writing some stuff together, collaborative writing, if you will, if we get a chance towards the end here, and it'll probably be a shorter session if there's only, us. So we'll see how it goes. So the first thing I want to think about when you're writing a poem, a lot of my poems are obviously, first person narrative. They're coming from my perspective. I'm using a lot of that first person point of view. But there's something to be said for, switching up the perspective every now and again, and writing as though the narrator of the poem is somebody else and not yourself. And so it's kind of interesting if you can play with those points of view a little bit, because it allows you to demonstrate other things, other, aspects of the poem, other aspects of the narrator. And so that's one of the things that I would like kind of, I would, when it comes to writing voice in your poem, that's one of the first things you need to consider. What kind of perspective are you going to use? And the one example that I had recently was, I was writing about that Master Greytail, the Squirrel King outside the window. I wrote it from my perspective, but I felt that it was told better when I took myself out of the poem and I wrote it as if I was observing somebody else. Because taking myself out of that point of view and forcing me to as more of a passive observer allowed me to kind of bring more, I guess, detail to the forefront. So that's one of the things that I would like to kind of mention when it comes to writing poems. Another thing is giving your narrator a bit of a persona. And we all have personas, right? We have Caroline and Cole, the librarians, and we have Caroline and Cole, the daughters, the sisters, I don't know, however many identities you might have. You have different personas that you wear depending on who you're with, right? I have Professor Me, I have Dad Me, I have Husband Me, I have Crazy Imposter Syndrome Me. The guy that still thinks I don't know what I'm doing no matter what it is, and I'm just waiting. Like no joke, I wrote poems about how I legit think I hoodwinked all 3 of the universities that gave me degrees. And I feel like I feel like I pulled a fast one, and I'm waiting for them to come back, and they're going to repo those degrees one day, and they're going to say, just kidding, no, we can't let this stand. You're too much of an embarrassment. So so that's my imposter syndrome me that comes out every now and again. And so yeah, that's just something that we want to think about. When you think about the persona that you're injecting in there, you can have a little bit of fun with a poem, especially if you're taking yourself out of your own position and you're injecting a little bit of persona onto the narrator who's doing the observations, especially if it's like a third person kind of a thing. And I like to use dialect. For instance, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and it's a very interesting conflict zone with dialects because we have the Pittsburghese in the foothills of Appalachia, right? That's the in Pittsburghese, it would be like, okay, so I'm gonna go red up now, right? I'm gonna go red up. I'm gonna eat some jumbo. I'm gonna go get some gum bands. I'm gonna take the bubbler out for a walk or something. Like these are all just. That last part probably didn't make any sense either. The bubblers, we have that in Wisconsin too, where the bubblers is like a drinking fountain, right? That's specific to I think a brand of drinking fountain. Buggies. If you're using buggy versus cart, I'm going to take the buggy through the grocery store as opposed I'm going to take the cart through the grocery store. That's another dialectal clue. And so when you're thinking about persona, you can think about what dialect could I impose in this, and what kinds of words would be representative of this person, of this persona that I'm writing in. So I grew up saying pop. I went down to Georgia. I taught at Georgia Southern University for a while. And when I was there, everything was Coke. So you go to a restaurant and they say, what do you want to drink? I'm like, what do you got? Well, we got Coke. We got Pepsi Coke. We got root beer Coke. We got Sprite Coke. We got Dr. Pepper Coke. And it was like everything was Coke, even though none of those things were Coke, right? Around here, you have like a 50-50 mix. It's like half of us are saying soda, half of us are saying pop, right? And there's a little bit of a debate going on about which one of those two things is correct. So you could think about what kinds of interesting terms kind of pop up. One of the things that's interesting about Pittsburgh, yins. Yins. You guys have heard that before?
Like
Maybe?
you
No?
all? Is that what
Yeah.
yins is?
It's
Okay.
yins. It's yins. It's just YINZ, yins. And it's just the Pittsburghese way of saying y'all, right? So yeah, those are fun little things that you can kind of, every now and again, I like to throw a yins into a poem or a yins into a story just to give it some flavor, right? And give people pause and be like, is he saying what I think he's saying here? Yes, I am. So those are things that we can do. So when you're thinking about voice in your poem, it doesn't always have to be your voice. You can pick another person's voice and impose that on the poem. It will change the poem to some extent. But then think about ways that you can set that person's voice apart from your voice by using dialect and tone and irony and that sort of thing. And use some wordplay. So of course, everybody knows what point of view is here. I'm not going to go too far into that because you guys are, intelligent people and you know all this. But I still go over it with my students, so it's kind of a habit. First person, that's your perspective, me, my, mine kind of thing. I. Then you have the second person, the you, yours, right? Those are common if you want to, kick up some tension. So talking like writing something in a second person perspective, you have that a lot of action adventure books sometimes, murder mysteries or something. Horror stories will sometimes be written in that second person. It's sometimes just to kind of like, elevate the tension sometimes. Sometimes poems are written in that way if you wanted to kind of elevate some tension and you want to try to, make the reader feel like they're part of it, I guess, a little bit more. But choose your own adventure stories were the ones that I remember this from as a kid. Like, you are walking down the path is about to fall out from under you. You can A, run, B, go back, or C, stand still. And each of those things, you go to a different page and you continue the story and you have to bear the repercussions, right? I'm going to stand here page 74, and then nope, I'm gonna go to page 20 and I'm gonna run. That's what I'm gonna do. That's the thing I'm gonna do. So you get what I mean. And then third person. Third person is usually going to be, in addition to first person and third person, those are the two most common ways that we're going to write in poems. Those are just the two most common perspectives. Third person perspective gives us a little bit more to play with too. If you start to think about third person omniscient, third person limited, and third person objective voice, right? So if you're telling the story in third person, you can choose to be the know-it-all, godlike narrator, the omniscient narrator. You can choose to just tell the story still through one person's perspective, or writing about the poem about the one person's perspective and not really having access to the people that are going on around them. Or you could be the objective. You are learning together, and you're just observing, passively observing this character, and you don't really have too many insights into what they are thinking at that time. So playing with perspective can really kind of help us to kind of see where our poems can go. And so I would encourage you guys to play around with point of view a little bit. I talked a little bit about the persona of the narrator, using dialect as clues. The one thing I didn't talk about is irony. I love to use irony in poems and stories and everything, because the use of irony, it tells us a lot about who we're dealing with, right? So if we're talking about verbal irony, that's usually sarcasm, that facetiousness that comes out where somebody says something that they really mean the opposite of, right? I use this with students sometimes, and really difficult situations where I have students that I disagree with on so many levels, but they'll come in and they'll start making, like one of the examples was, there was a discussion about healthcare, and they said that something about healthcare was supposed to be this, and I'm like, you're right, yes, you're absolutely right, we should just let people die. And then they're like, what? No, I didn't mean that, no. And I'm like, no, I'm just saying, you're saying we shouldn't invest in healthcare, and I'm like, yeah, you're right, we should just let people go. That's right, yeah. I obviously don't mean that, but I'm using that sense of sarcasm to kind of illustrate a point, because by making that my point in that way, the student kind of has to take pause and be like, wow, you just said something really horrible. Wait a second, maybe I got to backtrack a little bit. And so I use that a lot with students, not to really, I guess just to make points, just to illustrate a point, to sometimes to make them think a little bit more about what they're saying and how they're saying it. Cosmic irony, as you all know, are those elements where we're thwarted by our own intentions, right? That's in the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the first one. You had this, they had the cursed treasure, right? And this one guy, Bootstrap Bill Turner, ends up sending a piece of the treasure off to his son because he says they deserve to remain cursed. So the pirates threw him overboard because they could not break the curse now without him. And then they didn't realize until without the coin. And then after they threw him overboard, they realized they also need his blood to fix this. And there's that beautiful point in the movie where they're like, we tied a cannon to Bootstrap's bootstraps and sent him down to Davy Jones's locker. Of course, it was only after that we realized we needed his blood to lift the curse. And then one guy behind was just, and that's what you call ironic, right? And it's just a beautiful scene of cosmic irony kind of unfolding. They took action, and their own actions thwarted their intentions, right? Their efforts thwarted their intentions. Cosmic irony, delightful. Then there's dramatic irony, where your audience knows something that the characters don't know, right? The Romeo and Juliet. We know Juliet is drinking the sleeping potion, right? And she's just taking a sleeping draft. She's not really dead. Hamlet comes in. Oh my gosh, she's dead. I am going to kill myself now. And then he drinks the poison and he dies. And just as he dies, she wakes up and she's like, oh no, Hamlet, she's this in my heart. And then she kills herself. And you only realize that, yeah, it would have been good if he could just wait 2 seconds, give a little pause. She wakes up, everybody's happy. But instead, no, he jumps the gun, he overreacts. We know it as the audience, so we're seeing this character making a dumb decision, right? And you can't make them stop it, you know, but that creates tension. The audience knows something that they don't know. And you can work that kind of stuff into stories and into poems. Remember, poems are just that default storytelling device that I like to refer to as the original storytelling medium, right? So yeah, so that's something that you guys can think about. Think about using irony. The irony, especially if you have verbal irony, it tells a lot about a character. If you have a character who's back on the East Coast, where I grew up, we're a little more abrasive, I think, at times. We're not very passive aggressive. But then when I moved to the Midwest, I discovered Minnesota nice and Wisconsin nice. There's a little passive aggression that goes in there. I think I can say that without like offending too many people, right? But that's the thing. There's a little bit of that going on. It's kind of like when I was in the Southern hospitality in Georgia. It was kind of the same way. It was like somebody would come up and like, oh, do you want to come to church with me? No, I kind of stopped going to church a couple years ago. I just, it's not for me. And they're like, oh, bless your heart, bless your little heart. And it's like, oh, thank you for that delightful, you know, passive aggression. It's wonderful. So anyway, so that the verbal irony, the facetiousness, the sarcasm, it all kind of plays into character development. It gives us a sense of who your characters are and what they are trying to accomplish. Wordplay, fun things with wordplay, homonyms, homophones, right? The two words that are pronounced differently, but the two words that look alike but are pronounced differently are the homonyms. So like that would be refuse and refuse. Refuse as in I am not going to do that. Refuse as in I got hot garbage over here for you to pick up my refuse, right? So that's just one example. There's a lot of them that go around where if you just change the placement of the accent, right, which syllable is accented, refuse or refuse, the accent changes how the word is pronounced and changes to a completely different word, even though it looks the same. Homophones are wonderful tools, you know, because they're, you know, two terms that look alike. They're spelled the same, or they're spelled differently, but they sound the same. Homophones sound, that's it. So they sound the same, but they look different. So red versus red, you know, is the go-to example for that. And then you have hyperbole, purposeful exaggeration, you know, exaggerating for the sake of, in some cases, humor, right? David Sedaris had this wonderful thing where he had this great essay he was writing about going on tour. He likes to give things, just random presents out to people when he is doing a reading, right? And so he'll have something small. And so one time he was like, I have a reading tonight. Let's go to Costco and condoms. I'm going to get condoms. I'm going to bring a bunch of condoms out and I'm going to hand them out at my reading. And it was just a random thing that he was going to do. So he goes there, and when he writes about that, he says, oh, here I am with a cart full. He's like in Alabama. He's at a Costco in Alabama, and the only thing he has in his cart is a bottle of wine and two boxes of condoms the size of cinder blocks, right? Of course, he goes back to the New Yorker, who ends up printing this essay, and the New Yorker tries to say, we did some checking, some fact checking. They don't have the 24 count condom pack is the largest condom pack that they will sell. It is nowhere near the size of a cinder block. And he says, no, it's humor. It's exaggeration for humor. That's what I'm trying to do. And they're like, you can't do that. And he says, I'm the writer. Of course I can do that. And it's a great point that he makes there. But hyperbole, purposeful exaggeration to invoke humor or to just make a point sometimes. Sometimes you just gotta kick it up to that next level. And in poetry, it works extremely well because you only have so much space to work with. And sometimes just throwing in a little exaggeration someplace, that can be pretty helpful. Oxymorons, contradictory terms, you know, if we're thinking about COVID, oxymorons, alone together. Right now we are alone together, right? We are deafening silence. That's what I'm hearing in my headphones when everybody's muted, right? So, um, uh, open secrets, right? I have a lot of open secrets that I'm just sharing during these random, whatever these are, these workshops or conversations. So so yeah, so those are some fun word plays that we can use. We can use these different devices to make points, to invoke humor, to just give us perspective. So that's basically a lot of that stuff. Oh, okay. I had that one. I was supposed to be on there, and I was supposed to take it off of this. This is not supposed to be on this one, this slide. So that's okay. Just pretend that we already did that. I'm like, oh, I was going to talk about metaphors and similes and stuff like that. When we start talking about images, all right, so I'm going to touch on those real quick before we jump into this, word, before we move beyond the wordplay, or after we move beyond the wordplay. Whatever, we're just going to dig back in. The images, when we're talking about imagery and poetry, I want you to think about all of the sensory perceptions that you have. When we're talking about imagery, I don't talk about it in the sense of just pictures, right? I'm talking about your sights, smell, taste, touch, and sounds, right? All of these things come together to give us an aesthetic experience, right? There's an educational scholar out there, Ken Robinson, I believe, who says that, a lot of times when he criticizes education, he says the way that we model education in this country, it is an anesthetic experience, right? Where we're focused on getting students in rows. They're not necessarily engaging in active experiences. They're just passively sitting there in a room, and we are anesthetizing them so they're not having a lot of sensory input. The more sensory input's distractions, so we try to avoid those in the classroom sometimes. Where he's saying what we need to focus on is creating aesthetic experiences, which engages us with all of those sensory perceptions that we have to work with. The sights, smells, tastes, touch, sounds. So we shouldn't be putting kids to sleep, we should be waking them up, I think, is Kevin Robinson's way of saying that, if I can paraphrase him. And that's what we want to do with our poetry as well. It's not, you can only go so far with your own observations of like, I think this and I think that, and I think, and I know, right? That doesn't do too much for us, right? Because we're not really engaging our senses. If you, when Mary Oliver comes in and she's writing a poem about, I think it was Wild Geese that she wrote. She said, you do not need to be good. You only need to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves, or something like that. Something like that. If I can paraphrase and totally butcher her poem, I'm just drawing that as an example here. She's describing herself as, you are a soft animal, right? Not just an animal, a soft animal. She's appealing to a sense of touch. She's she's trying to invoke some other sensory perceptions instead of just saying, no, you don't. You imagine how much different it sounds if you say, you just have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And I could say, oh, you don't have to be good, just love what you love. I think Mary Oliver said it better, right? And that's what we mean by trying to invoke more images. I mean, that's just one very simple example. We'll take a look at a fun poem from Bob Hickok he's one of my favorites. So if you're interested in poetry, Bob Hickok, I'm giving him a plug here. That's who you want to read. Well, one of the many people you should be reading. So yes, so appealing to as many senses as possible. Figures of speech, things that you can do to kind of bring imagery into poetry in very meaningful ways. Personification. If you start to describe non-human things with human traits, try to do that in some of your poems. I don't know. You could do it with an animal, like sometimes your dog is a person or your cat is a person to you sometimes. You could do it with inanimate objects very easily though. You can talk about, I don't know, your chair. Sometimes my chair is restless, right? I'm sitting on it, but it keeps moving. really I'm probably moving it, but it feels like it's restless. It feels like it's, you know, sometimes I just got to get up and stand. So that restlessness can be in my chair or something like that, right? And we're gonna see some lovely examples of personification. Smoke is personified in the poem that we're gonna take a look at. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. So giving human traits to non-human things can be interesting for readers, and it can be engaging for us with imagery. And then metaphors and similes, very similar. They're both comparisons, right? Metaphors, when you know, the moon was a saucer floating over the glassine lake, right? The moon is a saucer would be a metaphor, right? The saucer is the moon. There's no like or as. Similes, like or as, right? There was a song I was going to share with you to talk a little bit about similes and metaphors, and that was mainly, I have the lyrics pulled up. Let me see if I can find them. It's this song by Tim Minchin. Tim Minchin is a comedy songwriter, and he has, gosh, where did the lyrics go? Lyrics. There we are. Haha. I was there. So here, if you take a look at this song, go ahead and Google it, listen to it on your own sometime. It's a delightful love song that is very kind of tongue-in-cheek. Your love is like fingernails on a chalkboard. Your love is like throwing myself overboard. And if you go through here long enough, some of them are like some of my favorites are, your love is like sand inside a bathing suit. Your love is a symphony with the sound on mute. I mean, these are some good similes, right? Pretty much all of them, most of them are similes. If you go through here, he does have this one moment where he makes the distinction. I understand he's using creative license here. He's actually using a bunch of similes, but you know, the overuse of metaphor. Okay, yeah, I'll give it to him. Wine on a concrete floor, the overuse of metaphor, the straight ahead in a sideways glance like a misstep in a dance. These are all things that he's using to describe his love and his wife, and it's delightful. And the thing that makes it so engaging is these metaphors and similes that he's using are things that we normally don't like combine as a positive thing. Usually we think about love as sugary, sweet, just like teeth rotting kind of language that's just like, oh, my heart, still my beating heart, you know, kind of thing. And he's sitting there going like, no, love is like the last breath of salty air. Your love is like a map that leads to nowhere. You know, these are just things that we don't normally associate with love. And in some ways, when I'm reading through these lyrics, if I'm listening to the song, I always have my students listen to it every term when I'm teaching creative writing. The reason why these work is because you can, at the end of the day, if you listen to the chorus, he's like, but I didn't see it coming. I'm in too deep. I guess I'll just keep swimming down, down, down. There's no point in trying to turn back now. I'm drowned, right? So he's kind of like resigning. I love you. I love you. I'm just resigning myself to that fact now. And that resignation, but that he's also like embracing love, and it's like it was an unexpected love, but it's a love that has him, like that has his attention. He is now dedicating him to it. He's now just, okay, I'm going with it because I didn't expect to love you, but now I love you, and so we're gonna make this happen. So in some ways, it's a very sweet song, but all of the metaphors are horrible things, right? A heart attack on Christmas Day. A breakdown on a motorway, like a heart attack on a Christmas Day, like scaling a cliff and falling off, like trying not to cough, right? All of these things are so uncomfortable. So I wanted to kind of like reference that and tell you to go listen to Tim Minchin's song because it's delightful. And it really gives you a great idea of how to create a memorable metaphor in your poems. You want to give people something that's unexpected. If you use the same metaphor over and over again, metaphors that have been used by William Shakespeare, I've never heard William Shakespeare say anything about sand inside a bathing suit. And that is what makes this metaphor work, right? You can, all of the love poems I always hear my students will inevitably write some kind of a love poem. And there was one unique one this term that was writing about sweet tea. Like his girlfriend was like peach sweet tea. And I was like, oh, okay, I haven't quite heard that before, so I'll give it to you. But usually it's all flowers and candy and happy things. So when you are choosing the metaphors that you're going to use, I'm going to try to tell you to kind of select metaphors that work in those oxymoron kind of ways. Love and fingernails on a chalkboard, two things don't go together. But if you can find a way to fit them together, then you have a memorable, lasting, impactful metaphor for your poems. Is that helpful? Yeah? Okay. Good. So that's just one of the things I just wanted to I wanted to use that as a reference real quick, so that, I don't know. You know why I wanted to do that. So every time I restart the presentation, I always have to fast forward through everything. Using comparisons in your poems are a great way to invoke images and integrate images. Using some personification to give traits to things that you normally wouldn't attribute those traits to. That's a great way of invoking some images in your poems as well. So can we read a poem together? Yeah. Do I have to read it, or does somebody else want to read it?
I can read it.
You want to read it, Carolyn?
Sure.
Okay. There's a link in the chat function, right? Should be there. It's in that Google Drive. Cole stuck it up there for us. So if you can pull it up on your laptop, you can go from there. I also have it on mine. I will have it here too.
I'm trying to figure out, I can probably just read it from your
Okay.
from your PowerPoint, just because it's going to take me too long to figure out how to find it.
Oh, okay.
All these different platforms. Which button? Where? Okay.
Okay.
Speaking American by Bob Hickok. When he learned I'm a poet, he asked if I knew this other poet. We don't all know each other, I told him as he informed me she likes cheese similes. Love is like cheese, time is like cheese, cheese is surprisingly like cheese. Then I said, I know this poet. He went, see? He went, see, means he said, see. See? But you know that if you're American and alive. I explained that I know this poet means I know her work. When he was like, work? When he was like, is like, he went, which is past tense of he goes, in case you're from another country and confused by our lack of roundabouts. But poetry isn't work, he said, unless you're talking about reading it. But I'm not talking about reading it, I went, in a moment that was the future past of everything I do from then on, such as snag the last of the hyacinth cookies and step onto the veranda to be awed by stars. Where I went, it's hard work to be awed by stars. They're just little lights about which we learn a song as children. And he was like, but I do wonder what they are. As both of us lifted our heads like birds, waiting for our mother to throw up in our mouths. When I shared the image, he was like, gross. But then he went, you're right, that's what we do. We expect the sky to feed us. This led to a long discussion about yearning, in which the word yearning never appeared, in which he went and I went, and he was like, and I was like, and the stars kept doing what the song says they do. Because burn your hydrogen, little star, doesn't fit the diatonic harmony that pivots on an opposition between tonic and dominant, and a tune derived from my French. Voudrais-je, maman. Then a woman came out wearing a red dress, the size of a whisper, lit a smoke, and the smoke acted all floaty and sexy and better than us. And she was like, want one? And we were like, yes.
All right. Do you guys want to venture a guess as to why I decided to share this poem?
Well, I know for one thing you were talking about the smoke.
Hmm.
Um, and the smoke, so the smoke I think is a metaphor for like artsy types, I guess. Or
Yeah,
something.
there's definitely this. It's okay. So the smoke. If you're thinking about the archetypes, what is it? Is it a synecdoche or metonymy? I
Oh.
believe it's if you okay, so one of those one synecdoche I believe is okay, so I always get them mixed up in my head. But synecdoche is one of those things where you identify something by a smaller piece of the whole, right? So hands on deck are representative of all the sailors that are working on the deck. And I believe that you could make the argument that the cigarette is synecdoche for the art student, the quintessential
Okay.
art student, right? So you could, yes, there is a tie there where the smoking, like back in the 70s and 80s, like if you were a poet, smoking kind of was synonymous with what you did. Stephen King, you take a look at all of these old clips of him writing back in the 80s, and he always has a cigarette, right? He's always smoking. He never does it now, but back in the 80s, he always did that. So yeah, it's one of those cultural staples, right? If you were a writer, you smoked. That is just what you did. And so yeah, so that's definitely, there's a metaphor going in there that's representative of something else. Could be the art student, could be something else. Um, there's also a personification, right? The smokes
Yeah.
smoke,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
so you have the smoke. Smoke means many different things here, right? Smoke
Yeah.
is the cigarette, right? She lit a smoke. She lit a cigarette. She lit a smoke, and the smokes smoke. Now there's that. Whoa, okay. So this is there's layers here, right? So she lights the cigarette. Smokes smoke is now acting all floaty and sexy and better than us, right? There is just something about those lines that it makes me want to say yes, right? Why
Yeah.
is it? Well, because smoke is curling, it's dancing, right? It's wafting so smoothly, so aloof, right? If I could move like smoke, I would be Casanova, right? Um, so smokes, it's moved the way it moves, the way that it just floats above you, like it is better than you, right? It's like, please, right? Um, there's some other great descriptors here. When you start to think about the woman came out wearing a red dress the size of a whisper. What is that? I mean, what is that dress? I mean, what kind of dress are we talking? We're talking like 18th century, 19th century, Victorian, you know? No,
No.
no, no. This is probably more, I don't know, probably more 2000, 2005, somewhere there. But the size of a whisper, I mean, that's an interesting way to say it was a small dress. And what's more engaging, what's more interactive, what's more meaningful to you as a reader if you read that and you're like, a woman came out wearing a small red dress, and then a woman
Yeah.
comes out wearing a red dress the size of a whisper. It's like, oh, that's almost indecent. What is this context here? um so yeah, so just that's one of those things where I'm trying to say, try to use the unexpected image, try to link unexpected images. You use this sound, this auditory image of a whisper. A whisper is sound, right? But a whisper is soft and low, shh, and it's small. And when you use that to describe the dress, it's just a very rich way of understanding what's going on there. Make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um,
I, I like the wordplay in this poem too. I really like that part talking about I mean, it was like if you're not American, you're not gonna understand, or if you're a foreign, if you're a foreign person, you don't know what this means. But he went, and her work, which is poetry, but poetry is not work unless you're reading it.
yeah. Yeah, those are great. And it's
Humor
the
is
thing is,
fun too. really funny.
Yeah, it really is. There's so many great moments like that in this. When you start out with the cheese, right? Um, she likes cheese similes. Love is like cheese, time is like cheese is surprisingly like cheese. And then I said, "Oh, I know this poet." He went, "See?" I'm like, "No, no, I know her work. What? Work? Right?" And it's this great. You have this interaction between these two characters. You have two characters going on. Well, more than two characters, I guess, when you start to factor in the lady with the whisper dress. But um, but you have these two characters that are just, this international guy, this guy that's from another culture who's trying to, understand what he's trying to say, and he's trying to communicate something, but apparently there's a little bit lost in translation. Um, One of the things that really resonated with me was the roundabouts. I mean, until recently, there
Right.
weren't there weren't many roundabouts here in the States, right?
Yeah.
So now, like, they're of course adding them in every intersection, it seems like, at every major highway. But like when I was a kid, we didn't have roundabouts. They were all four-way intersections, and there were stoplights or stop signs or yield signs, and you just had to navigate that. Whereas now you have the roundabouts. But then you also think about the way Americans communicate. If you're writing something in American English, it's very direct, right? In the same way that we don't have those verbal roundabouts. So you have this like kind of punny thing going on where this roundabout could refer to the roundabout that we are going around in a traffic circle, or it's a pun that's referring to, the way that we talk and the way we communicate. So yeah. So there's some really great things going on in this piece.
Well, and
Uh,
how did they end up like, I don't know, cheese made me think of Wisconsin, and then all of a sudden you're on a veranda, and so you're like in the South somewhere.
yeah, it happens, man. It happens. There are places around here that do have kind of a southern feel in Minnesota, Wisconsin area. I'm like blanking off the top of my head. Um, there was this place in Stillwater that my wife and I did a chocolate tour. It was like they had chocolates at all these different bed and breakfasts and places along the way. And there was this place that was I forget what it was called, but it's just outside of Stillwater, and they do a lot of weddings there. And it has almost this old timey plantation-y feel to it. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting, place. But yeah, and yeah, anyway, but yeah, so do you also, the thing is, the what you're also referring to though is this poem isn't staying stagnant. It's not staying in one place. It whisks you from here to there. Then the same way that he's traveling, right? Because I imagine he's having this conversation with somebody while he's traveling too. I kind of get that sense, right? That this is a conversation he's having with a guy on an airplane or something. Um, you go to the veranda, and then you're like, oh, the birds, one of those personifications that really, I don't know if it's really personification, or just a really astute observation. Waiting for our mother. Oh yeah. Okay, so it's a simile. It's a simile. He was like, but I do wonder what they are, as both of us lifted our heads like birds waiting for our mothers to throw up in our mouths. When I shared the image, he was like, gross. But then he went, you're right. That's what we do. We expect the sky to feed us. Okay, so the personification is coming in here with the sky trying to feed us. And you have this great image of mother birds throwing up in their mouths as a simile for them. They're just sitting there staring up the sky like two birds in a nest waiting for mothers to throw up in their mouths. Like there's something beautiful in that simile, in that personification. And I think this is just it's just one of the best poems that I know of that has all of this going on in it, right? So Cole shared the link through Google Docs. You can go ahead and click on that and find it. I'm sure you can find it. I think this also might be from his book Animal Soul, which was a runner-up for the National Book Award back in 2000 something. I think 2004, maybe 2005. but it was a beautiful book. Great poem. Lots of really great poems for him. He has another one calling him back from layoff, which is describing a time when he was working. I believe he was working as a manager in an auto plant or a auto parts plant, and he had 7 people on layoff, and he had the opportunity to call one back, which is also very fitting for our time. But there's such great imagery there, because when he's talking about the conversation he had on the phone, he said, as his whiskers scrubbed the mouthpiece clean, he was sitting on the couch watching cars painted with ads for Budweiser follow cars painted with ads for Tide around a circle that's a metaphor for life, because everybody goes around in circles and they eventually run out of gas and end up in the stands yelling, "We want crowd on our dogs," right? It's just another really great poem with some great imagery that's very befitting what's going on now with all the furloughs and layoffs and stuff that are going on currently. So yeah, so Bob Hickok, I recommend him highly. Anyway, so that's what I wanted to share. As you guys read through on your own, think about what imagery stands out to you. You guys found a couple of pieces that really struck you, right? There's a lot in there that speaks to me. And then you have elements of voice. How do the elements of voice come together? How does he differentiate his voice from somebody else's voice? How does the voice of the narrator in the poem come through in the way that he works? And then also, we talked a little bit about the wordplay. There's a lot of fun wordplay going on in this poem. All right. So do you guys want to try a little exercise before we go?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So like last time, have a little assignment, your marching orders or recommendations, or if you don't want to do it, don't have to. But this is for next time. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to think about imagery and words and voice and how all these things come together in a poem. So go ahead and window gaze for a while, or go for a walk, or explore your, I don't know, excuse me. Excuse me. Or you could explore your vegetable drawer. If you're stuck at home, you can't leave. I know we had somebody in the workshop last week that was like, I can't even go for a walk. And yeah, it kind of sucks. But there's stuff in your house that I'm sure you probably haven't examined before, right? So the vegetable drawer that's gone untouched since before COVID. Is it just me that has that? No, is it? I don't know. Like I opened it up yesterday to clean it out because I was like, ooh, I don't even remember buying asparagus. And it is what it is, right? So yeah, there are things that you could do. You could just open up that junk drawer and make an inventory of the stuff that's in the junk drawer, like all of the phone chargers from the phone that you had 6 years ago, or 7 phones ago, or like the flip phone. Maybe you find that you have a flip phone still floating around. I didn't realize we still did. My son comes out playing with it, and he was watching a Power Rangers episode, and in this Power Rangers episode, they had like a flip phone morpher, and so he's like, "Power up!" And I'm like, I remember that phone. That was from my college days. Jeez, I didn't even know we had that. But yeah, so you can just go someplace in your house that you have a lot of just random junk. It could be the junk drawer, it could be that drawer in the fridge, could be a garage, or might want to clean out underneath your bed. I don't know. But there are places that you can go even within your house to record just strange images. If you have kids, your kids will assemble these images for you often by placing things in close proximity, things that you would never juxtapose with one another ever. And so I'm dealing with that with my kids. But so kids are great. If you do have kids, or if you know people who have kids, they actually have some great poetry material in those.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what you can do is go ahead and make a list of some interesting images that you haven't noticed previously. It could be things that you observe on the walk. It could be those things from the junk drawer. Just maybe sometimes you're driving down the street and you see 2 things that you never saw that are right next to one another. You notice them for the first time. Go ahead and make note of those. Write those down, right? And then make a list of interesting quotes. So I would say, in the same way that we did last week, have maybe 2 columns or 2 pages in a notebook, and you have a quotes page in the notebook where you just write down interesting quotes, interesting wordplay that you hear people just using every day, or and then you have the list of images that you're just observing, and you're just recording images in your notebook for a day, right? You don't have to do anything with them, just record them. Then when you have a bunch of images that are interesting, you might see common themes, some images that go together, some images that look like they didn't go together in real life, but they need to go together now, right? So you'll piece those things together, you pull out a couple of those images, and then you pull out some of the words, some of the random quotes, right? And see if you can draft a poem that integrates at least 2 of the images from your list, as well as one of the quotes, or at least part of one of the quotes that you've had. It could be one really insensitive comment that somebody made about something, and you keep bringing it back in as kind of like in a villanelle kind of repetitive way, where that repetition takes on new meaning every single time, right? Like if somebody says trust me, the first time you're like, all right, no, trust me, trust me, trust me, trust me. It gets a little bit of a different meaning each time you say, oh, just trust me on this, trust me on this, right? And by the time you get to the end, you're like, I know now just by you saying that I should not trust you at all in this moment in time. Not calling anybody out. I'm just saying it's one of those key phrases, right? So that's what I would say. Pull out a quote, pull out some images, see if you can bring them together to write a short poem that accomplishes something. Okay? That's your assignment. Do you guys want to do it together a little bit? Do you guys, I don't know. Do you guys want to try to make a list?
Sure.
Okay.
What do you think?
Okay, look around where you are right now. And what imagery do you guys see? My room is my office is nothing but clutter, so I got lots. I do. I got some good stuff too.
Our office is like that too.
Yes.
Because it's usually my husband's, but
yes,
there's a guitar in the corner.
Okay, guitar.
Not where it usually belongs, but
is it a guitar that has been played recently?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So it's not the guitar that's just there for decoration. It's a functional one. I mean, there are things
not put away.
Yeah. All right. So we got the guitar. We have the guitar. What else?
So there was a hole in the side of my house or my apartment, and my landlord patched it up yesterday, but today the birds, I think, wanted to get in there. So I was sitting at my computer today, and birds kept like it's very close to the window, and birds kept kind of like coming up and then like flapping around, and I could hear them. And I don't really like birds. They kind of creep me out. So like then I would just like I was like, because I was on a bunch of meetings too, and then I was kind of just turning around like, ooh, what's going on?
I had a poem that was after the aftermath of the move. It was in my Breathe Automatic collection, this one, and it was there was a scene in there about a woodpecker that when we first moved to Wisconsin, then we had pine wood siding on the house. The apartment that we were renting, and the woodpeckers would just drill in there and scrape around at like 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, and we're just like, get those things out of there. So my wife, she would take a bag of tennis balls and she would go outside and she would pelt the wooden siding with a bunch of tennis balls until all the woodpeckers flew out, and then it would buy her about an hour and a half of peace. In my poem, because it's illegal to kill woodpeckers, so I did not kill a woodpecker, but in my poem I killed the woodpeckers with a pellet gun because I needed sleep, and so I couldn't kill them physically, so I had to kill them in a poem. So that's one of the good things about being a writer. It's one of the great things about being a writer is you can live vicariously through your poems and do the things in your poems that you wouldn't normally do. It's kind of cathartic. So yeah. All right, so what other yeah, go ahead.
We have a woodpecker that's been on our house almost every other morning. At least it isn't ever. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So my husband likes a lot of sci-fi, so there's a lot of Doctor Who memorabilia in here,
Yeah.
and like Babylon 5 and Star Trek, and yeah.
Yeah.
And his stuffed Bill the Cat. Do you know Bill the Cat and Opus the Penguin from, oh, what's the guy? It's a cartoon.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
hmm Is it in good shape, or is there stuffing coming out, or
Well, he's kind of an ugly cat anyway.
ugly cat? And now I want to know what makes him ugly.
This is Bill.
Oh.
He's got two different sized eyes. And he's been around since college. I'm sure he's gotten like thrown around like a football. And
So what would make your eyes do that? Out of curiosity, what would make one eye get really big and the other one? I mean, I'm thinking stroke, caffeine intake.
Maybe if you're laying on your side, like with one of your eyes is in the pillow, and then something like really like wakes you up really quick, but you can't see out of one eye.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's Bloom County, Burke breathed.
Bloom County, yeah, right on, yeah. There you go.
Oh, very
Yeah,
good.
this is Opus, and it says "Be my little love monkey" on the heart.
Oh, that's delightful.
Yeah, I bought that. I bought that for my husband before he was my husband. But.
Ah, very good.
I have a lot of things, but.
I have just a lot of clutter. I have books that I got to go through. I have random stuff on my walls. I have a news article. I don't know if you can. This was me in my college job. This is how I paid for college.
What are you doing? I can't really tell.
I was a mascot for a minor league baseball team.
Oh, okay. It looks like a costume, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So I have like my last season there, the local magazine decided to do this little thing to say, "Hey, thank you for your service," kind of a thing, and so I did that, and my wife, we were just dating at the time, and she just took it and framed it, and I've had it on the wall ever since. It was the best and worst job I ever had. It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pitching my memoirs. My memoirs are going out. Nobody's bid on them yet, but I've been pitching my memoir. It's called tentatively titled "What the Fuzz: My Life in the Minors."
Ooh.
So, yes, nice. It's delightful. It has great stories about heat stroke during parade routes and interns arguing over mascot etiquette with the EMTs. There was a great essay about that. And, I didn't know what the furry community was. Furry fandom, I guess. Didn't know what it was. I was single. I met a really cute girl who was also single, who did some work with Make-A-Wish. And when I met her, she introduced herself, and then she said, "Oh, just so you know, I'm a wolf too." And I met her as, "Oh, I'm the mascot for the Erie Seawolves." So I was dressed up as a wolf. And in that story, I went on a date that was either the best date I ever had or the worst date I ever had. I will let the readers of that memoir think about that.
Yes. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So anyway, so it's delightful stuff. So I have just like random stuff. I have like my bobblehead floating around here somewhere. I got weird plaques from that, and so if you come into my office, I have my baseball card. It's
cool.
Stuff like that. So I could throw that kind of stuff in there, and of course, you could have a lot of fun with a 6-foot-tall anthropomorphic wolf.
Mm-hmm.
So you could say a mascot. John Oliver does some interesting things with mascots. Have you guys heard any interesting quotes recently?
Well, I talked to a 7-year-old on the phone for about an hour this morning. We talked about a lot of things, actually,
Yeah.
including a business. Okay, so it's a business that like the menu is like it's a restaurant and the menu is like real food, but all of the real food is actually just made out of like dessert. So like you could get a corn dog that's like a brownie on the inside, but it's like confetti cake on the outside. Or you can get like baked beans that are just like jelly beans with chocolate syrup.
Wow.
Yeah,
I
it was
kind of want to
really
go to
intense.
I kind of want to go to this restaurant now.
Yeah, the restaurant also has like a dessert menu, but the dessert menu is just like it's like so like the dessert is like you want a banana split, but then you actually just get like a hot dog with like it's just like it looks like a banana split, but it's actually like a hot dog and like all this I don't know.
Well, that's
Um
beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful. Yeah. So the
yeah.
dessert menu is the real food and the real food is the dessert menu. I like this. I like this. It'd be
But it gets confusing in my mind because I can't remember if it's actually a hot dog or if it's actually a banana. But either way, people are gonna really like it.
I think it would be fun. I think it would be fun. A fun novelty. Um
Those stuff you
that's-
get from 7-year-olds. Oh my gosh.
And she's
yeah.
like so sad because she has a pink, what do you call it? Oh, she has a pink hammock in her room instead of a purple one, and she would really rather have a purple one. And that's why
Nice.
I'm into hammocks too. So yeah.
I gotcha. I like this. I like this. Kids are a great source. Kids are a great source for some of these things because they'll say just random things that I don't know. I guess like the creativity kind of dies in you as you get older, right? And so if you're around kids, you can kind of rekindle some of that every now and again, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think especially if you're serious about it, and if you ask the right questions, you can get some really good answers.
you can. You absolutely can. Some of the things I'm thinking about that my kids have said. Well, one thing my kid has said, the ha ha ha, I sit you head, I sit you head. Um, you can kind of imagine what's going on in that. When it's like 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, I'm trying to sleep, and my toddler comes in and just sits on my head and goes, ha ha ha, I sit you head, I sit you head. Uh, Meanwhile, add in the image or I guess the sensory perception of the sour tang of a wet disposable nighttime diaper.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Delightful. Delightful. Nighttime diaper on your head. I sit you head, I sit you head. It is not a pleasant experience, but it's an experience that everybody laughs at me when I tell them
Funny
about
if it doesn't
it,
happen
right?
to you.
Right. There you go. There was one thing I always I love to use this example from when I was in when the YMCA was actually open, and I would go to the YMCA and I'd do a quick workout in the summer, when I'm home with the kids full time, and I'm eking out every hour. Like they have 2 hours of free daycare, and I'm like eking every minute of that out that I can, right? So I go there, I work out for like an hour, hour and a half, and then the last half hour I sit with a notebook in the front lobby, just scribbling things like observations, thoughts, random musing, whatever I'm doing. I'm just dumping into the notebooks. It's usually garbage, but every now and again you get like a nice little nugget. And one of the nice little nuggets that I've never done anything with, but if you guys can, you're welcome to it. There was a mom with one child behind her, and she turns and she says, "Honey, did you lock your sister in the locker again?" And the little girl that's behind her turns and looks at her and says, "I'm not saying no, Mama." And there was so much that was going on there. I've been trying to unpack it into something for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
But it's like you have the did you lock your sister in the locker again? That one word again like compounds it. It's like this is a repeat offender. And then the fact that the kid's not going to say no, I'm assuming her mom has chastised her for lying in the past. And so she's like, I'm not going to lie. So I'm not gonna say no, but it was like the way that she was it was like a college student trying to get away with something, right? In that same, like, my professor side of me is like, wow, that 5-year-old kid has so much in common with one of my college freshmen that's trying to get away with something. And so, yeah, it's a delightful little sentence that you can kind of play with. Where's your, did you lock her in the locker again? I'm not saying no, mama. And there's a story there. Okay, I guess that's enough of me yakking and stuff for today. So the main takeaways, the main things I want you to think about as you guys are playing with your let's see. I'll just leave it in this window. As you guys are playing with your own poems, think about ways that you can invoke imagery. Think about ways that you can give personification to things that aren't people. Think about metaphors and similes and those kinds of comparisons. Try to go for the unexpected, things that just don't look like they go together at first. And if you can just kind of have a bunch of opposites, things that are, for me, it's always, my first one I always come back to is that sand inside a bathing suit. That one, love is like sand inside a bathing suit. There's a part of me that wants to say yes and ouch, no, but it's true. There's some truth to that, right? Because love is not just the sugar and sweet, it's also highly uncomfortable at times, right? And if you've been in a relationship with anybody for a long period of time, you kind of can identify with that, I think, a little bit. So those are the things. If you're going to use some similes and metaphors, you should use some similes and metaphors, but try to pair things together that don't normally go together. Try to pair things together that look like they're almost like oxymorons, things that just counterproductive, counterintuitive. Because the more original those similes, the more original those metaphors, the more standing power they're going to have. They'll have a higher impact. Go ahead and make sure that you're appealing to as many senses as possible. So sensory perception, super important. Try to appeal, if you can, to at least 3 of your 5 senses in every poem. Give us at least one sound, give us at least one image, and give us at least some taste or touch or smell. Try to take 3 senses and try to bridge those 3 senses together somehow in that poem. And then when you start thinking about voice, go ahead and play with the point of view. Play with that first person or third person point of view. Play with how much does your narrator know about what's going on in the scene? Are you guys learning together with an objective narrator? Is this narrator somebody who's got the inside scoop, right? So this inside narrator, you're watching 2 people interacting with somebody in the front yard, and your narrator has the ability to see inside their house and what's going on in the garage behind them or what's going on in their living room. To the calendar, like you see a couple interacting on the front stoop, and then your narrator can zoom inside and see on the calendar circled in red, divorce final, right? Does that make sense? So play with that point of view. What can your narrator see? Are you guys learning together? Is it the omniscient narrator? Play with first person or third person. Does this need to be told in your voice, or maybe if it is told in first person, maybe it's not you telling it. Maybe you're telling that in the voice of, I don't know, a 5-year-old. There is a poem. I keep on forgetting her name. I'm at a loss, but I'll have it for next time. She wrote a collection of poems. I think it was a collection of poems, a full collection, where she was just interviewing her 2-year-old, and she was pulling out 2-year-old speak, and she pieced it into this beautiful collection of poetry. So kids are great material. So if you are interacting with kids, even on Skype, or if you don't have kids, get on Skype with one of your friends that has kids. I'm sure you know somebody who does, and then say, hey, can I talk to your kid? And I have some questions. Hot dogs, hot dog banana split, a banana split that looks like a hot dog that's actually sweet candy. Is that good? What are your thoughts? Yes, and that sort of thing. So play with the point of view, play with all that stuff. Those are my takeaways.